Hey everyone, welcome to episode 71 of Hello Church. I'm Justin Trapp.
I'm Wade Bearden, and today's topic is how pastors can have a healthy ministry-life balance. Justin, I think that's probably one of the most important topics that pastors can wrestle with today because the world's changed. Pastors need to hear that. So if you feel burnout, if you feel like, I don't have time for my church or I don't have time for my family, how can I achieve balance? This podcast episode is for you, and it could change your year. It could change your life. I don't want to speak too big, but I think these principles are going to be helpful at the least.
With great power comes great responsibility in this episode. This episode is for you. But first, we would like to say, hey, if you've been listening to Hello Church or you've been watching Hello Church on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, subscribe, turn the notifications on so that you see when we actually publish something, and you'll be one of the first to see that or hear that or get that when a new episode drops. And then also,
and like you can go to your friends and you'll be like, oh yeah, I've already heard that podcast episode.
Man.
You just, I don't know. I just feel like you'd be a whole lot cooler if you subscribed.
All the cool pastors
are doing it.
All the cool pastors are doing it. And then share the podcast. Like if you find an episode that you think is really helpful, that'd be great if you could share that. We certainly are very grateful and appreciate that. And then lastly, join our community. So I don't know if you guys know this. We have a community. It's called the Pastor Circle. It's a Facebook group. And it's a great community of pastors. Pastors are asking questions. They're encouraging others. We feel like, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there, but I'm really proud of the community and the group that we have.
Yeah. We are not a community where we just sit around arguing about theological questions. I think it's important to talk about that within certain spaces. This is a group where we don't argue about theological issues. There's a place for that. But this is a group where we encourage each other, where we come together and we can ask questions. We can discuss church ministry. And it's been super helpful for me just kind of reading through the comments and posting. And I think it's been super helpful for the people a part of that. So go to facebook.com and search for the Pastor's Circle. You can also click the link in the show notes or in the YouTube comments window or info window, and it'll take you directly there. Just answer the questions. We just want to make sure you're a pastor. So answer those questions and have fun with it. I think you're going to enjoy this group. Make sure you do that here soon because it's going to be helpful. It just might change your life.
Man, there it is. New tagline, Hello Church, the podcast that changes your life.
Or just makes it a little bit better.
Better.
Maybe we could do that for the tagline.
Yeah, marginal improvement. There it is. The podcast for marginal improvement. Hey, let's dive right in. So we saw this stat, not too long ago, and it said 90% of pastors don't actually retire as pastors. And we've all seen the stats from Barna and the state of the church and the state of pastors, and it's, minimum a half of pastors are currently discouraged. And so it has, I think it's important for us to take a look at this bigger picture of what does it look like for a pastor to not just survive and retire as a pastor one day, but really thrive through the decades of your life in ministry. What does that look like? How do you do that? And hopefully today's content and discussion, maybe you take away one or two things that is going to really help you in that endeavor of having a healthy ministry life balance. Because let's be honest, if you've been in ministry, you've been around ministry, it can just suck the energy out of you sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't want to come to you in this podcast. We don't want to say, if you follow these steps or if you achieve a perfect ministry life balance, that your ministry or your role as a lead pastor won't be stressful. It's going to be stressful in some senses because you're following the call of Christ. You have this burden to communicate the gospel, to live out the gospel, and to act as a shepherd to your people. What our argument is that you want your ministry to be stressful for the right reasons. Yeah. You don't want it to be stressful because, I I don't ever get to spend time with my kids or my family, or, oh, I feel alone and I don't have anyone to talk to. That's not good, stressful. And so as we work through these things, I hope you kind of keep that in mind. And the first thing, as we talk through how pastors can have a healthy ministry life balance, and it almost feels simple, but we're going to share it for a reason, and that's practice spiritual disciplines. I think we can become so busy in life that we fail to pray, to read, to fast, to practice silence and meditation, and it's the same with ministry. I think that some people believe, oh, as a pastor, you could never fail to do those things. But as a pastor, you know it's true that sometimes you don't. And I think it's so important that you put that into your schedule, that you mark that out. You say, okay, I'm going to have a silent retreat, or I'm going to have an hour of silence, or I'm going to have an hour of meditation. I'm going to take time to pray. That's so important. And if you're too busy to do that, you're probably always going to find yourself burn out. So you've got to find a way to structure your schedule to fit in, to fit around the spiritual discipline. So that would be our first secret or tip for you today.
Yeah, and let's be honest, if you're a pastor and you've been preaching for a long time, I think it's really easy, right, to make your devotional time sort of hybrid, right? It turns into sermon prep time. I'm the same way. When I was pastoring and I was preaching regularly, it was hard for me to just maintain that devotional time, because you see a verse and it like means something to you, and you have a moment, or you're meditating on it, or maybe you feel like Holy Spirit speaking something to you, and then all of a sudden it turns into like, man, this sermon could go here and I could do this. I think it's important. That happens, right? But I think it's important that you still maintain that personal devotional time. You know, me as an entrepreneur, I struggle, right? I told my wife I don't have hobbies because everything turns into a business idea, right? I just can't enjoy things for what they are. There's always that next step for them. And I think just maintaining some discipline in your personal devotional time, in those spiritual disciplines, is going to greatly help you as you're trying to balance everything that's going on in this chaos. There's a time for sermon prep and there's a time for personal devotion. Sometimes those times overlap, but try to keep them separate if possible.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I do think that some of the best sermons find their seed or their genesis in your devotional time.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't approach our devotional time and say, oh, I'm doing this because I've got to prepare for a sermon. So prayer, meditation, silence.
Absolutely.
When we talk about spiritual disciplines a lot, Justin, it's easy to just talk about prayer and Bible reading, but the silence, meditation, those fast things, it's just very important. Those are very, very important. Number two, and this is something we talk a lot about because this is what we do here at Ministry Pass, is pastors, you're going to want to use a sermon calendar, because as you are planning out your year, you're going to find that when you plan ahead, it's going to be easier to execute and you're going to stress less. So if every Monday, or maybe if you're off on Monday, every Tuesday you're thinking to yourself, wow, I've got to figure out what I'm going to preach, you might find yourself really just kind of running on fumes that entire week, because not only do you have to select your text and study and preach it, but you're starting from zero doing that. So we talk about sermon calendars because we do think it's important to plan ahead. And then two, Justin, if you've got a difficult text or topic, you've already started looking at that weeks ahead of time. So that week where you preach, it's just like, it's not a wild week. You're like, okay, I've already set aside time. I've already rearranged my schedule to devote more study time to that. It's very important to plan ahead.
Anytime we talk about planning in ministry, I hear John Maxwell's voice in my head, right? The leadership Mufasa, failing to plan is
Mufasa.
Failing to plan is planning to fail. But I think it's so true. If you can get ahead and you can be organized, half of all pastors say writing a sermon every week is stressful. It adds stress to their life. For those of you that feel that way, And for the other half of you that are not telling the truth, if you can get organized, right? If you can get ahead, that's going to lower that stress level. That's going to help you feel a little bit more prepared, and that's going to allow you to divert energy where you would be stressed out and in the weeds, trying to just make it to this Sunday, trying to get through this sermon. You're going to be able to divert that energy and that focus and that time to other things that are important in your ministry or perhaps your personal life.
And I realize too, this comes easier to some people.
Sure.
So for me, when I was in college, if I had a 16-page paper, and I've said this before, I would start 16 days in advance and write 1 page a day. And it was great. And I realized there are a lot of people who are like, I can't do that. So if you feel like it's difficult for you to plan ahead, here's what I would encourage you to do. Try to get 1 week ahead every single week. Just get 1 week ahead to where, okay, not only am I figuring out what I'm going to preach this week, but I'm going to do it the next week. And then the next week, you're like, okay, I'm going to look now 2 weeks in advance and then 3 weeks in advance. And really just kind of build up. And eventually you get to the place where you're like, wow, I'm 6 months in advance. This is great. Oh, I'm planning my year in advance. Try to marginally get better, 1%, 2% every week, and you'll start to create those habits. So for some of you, you're like, man, planning ahead, I don't know how to do that. It's so important, and you're going to find so much freedom in that. It feels constricting, but you're going to find freedom in that.
Yeah, well, and let me say this. For those of you that are like, hey, preaching does not stress me out whatsoever. I love preaching. The thrill of the sermon, right? You live for that. I think having a calendar maybe is less about organization, but more about intentional discipleship. An intentional discipleship roadmap. So, maybe you can just get up and I don't want to say wing it, but you tend to have to prepare less. Having a roadmap, having a sermon calendar is going to help you have some intentionality into the topics, into the books of the Bible, even though sermon prep and preaching is easy for you. And at Ministry Pass, we've created calendars. We've got a topical calendar. We've got an expository calendar. We have a youth. We have a kids. We have a lectionary. We're releasing one. Did we already say what that is this coming?
I don't know if we have, but I think we can go ahead and do it. We've actually created a calendar to preach through the book of Acts in 1 year.
Yeah.
So if you're like, hey, I'd love to preach through a book of the Bible and just dig in, it's a 50-week series. So you've got room for a guest speaker or Easter or Christmas. You've got some leeway there. But in 1 year, you preach through the entire book of Acts. It's pretty amazing. We're going to be releasing those here the first Wednesday of October. And so if you're like, oh man, planning ahead it's kind of difficult for me, or I'd like to get some help, we want to help you do that. Not write your messages, but help you plan ahead and have research and have a launching pad. I think that's the best way to say it. So that's coming up. If you're thinking about, ministry life balance, you need to check that out. Sign up for a free trial of Ministry Pass, and you can actually look at last year's calendar, and that'll give you kind of a good roadmap of what we're bringing and what we're going to be releasing here the first Wednesday of October.
Yeah, get a head start on 2022, please, for your sake. The next thing I like to talk about is really empowering others around you, equipping, delegating. And I know this seems like pretty straightforward, but I can't tell you how many leaders I talk to where they're struggling and you start diving and digging deeper on like, what is the issue? And they're just like chief doers at their church. And they're just doing everything, and they're doing things that are unnecessary. They're doing things that really any warm body could do, but for some reason they've taken that on. And I think there's this misnomer, Wade, too, like where we preach these things like, hey, you should delegate. You should delegate things immediately, and your life is going to improve. You're going to have a little bit more margin, and that's kind of true, but kind of false. And here's what I mean. Once you start equipping the leaders around you, once you start delegating more, getting rid of things that you're doing, Pastor, that you probably shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be unloading a trailer early Sunday morning 2 hours before you're going to preach if you're at a school. There are many people that can do that. Here's the thing, though. When you do start delegating and you do start equipping those around you, you will have to slow down a little bit. Like, you feel like you're getting less done for a very short season, because as you're trying to bring people up, as you're trying to equip others around you, as you're trying to develop the leaders around you, it is going to take a little bit more energy on your part to get them up to speed. And so it will feel right in the very beginning that you're moving slower. Like it, and I've said this before, that speed is the enemy of delegation. And it's just easier for you to do it yourself. I totally get that. So it's important that you realize that, hey, once you start delegating, once you start equipping other volunteers and leaders on your staff, it is going to feel a little slower. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. But once they get caught up, once you've properly delegated to them, your life and ministry and team and organization, everyone will benefit from this endeavor.
Yeah. And so here's what I would have you do. This is real practical. Make a list this week of everything, or today, when you're listening to this, make a list of everything that you do on a weekly basis, possibly even a monthly basis for your church.
Or like if people need your input, you have to be at a meeting because they need your opinion. Write down everything.
Everything. Yeah. Someone locks themselves out of the church. If you're the one that has to go up there to unlock it, write everything down.
Or locks himself in the church.
Well, you just got to stay there. We got grape juice in the fridge.
Yeah, communion cups. Got a little carbs in them. You'll be fine.
Make a list and then circle all the things that only you as the pastor can do. And I'm not just thinking, oh, well, I don't know if I have somebody else to do that. Is there something that someone else can do, whether you have them or not?
Yeah.
So preaching a majority of the time, that's you. Doing funerals and weddings, that's you. Going to the hospital, that might be mostly you. Circle those things that only you can do. And then look at the others and say, okay, who can I delegate these to? And maybe just choose one a week and try to work through that. And we were reading through the book Atomic Habits, and the author makes this really great point. Then when we start new habits, usually we think of them going as this like straight line up, like we're improving. But he says actually what happens is you might even dip a little bit and you won't make improvement, and then you'll shoot up. There's this breaking point a couple weeks in, a month in, 2 months in. It's like working out. You start working out, that next week, are you stronger? No, you're sore. You're learning a new technique. And then it grows. So you're going to find that when you start delegating, you might not have extra time for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months. And then something's going to change and it's going to increase. So empower your leaders to do the work of ministry, and that's going to be super helpful for you.
Another thing that we like to recommend is that you get a coach. You find a mentor. You have someone that can bring a little accountability, that can bring a little evaluation to where you're at. Probably someone not in the church, but maybe a fellow pastor friend, or maybe a retired pastor, or someone in that you know previously, or someone that's in another city, somewhere where you can sort of unload, you can be yourself, you can unburden yourself, and be straight with them and say, hey, look, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm lonely. Like you can express those feelings and those thoughts with this person, and they can help you work through those seasons. Because here's the thing, bro. I was thinking about coaching. A lot of times you're going to learn these lessons, right? Mm-hmm. We'll do the same thing we'll do the insanity, right? We'll keep doing the same thing, looking for different results, and then one day it'll click and we'll go, man, I shouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But a lot of times what a coach or a mentor or a therapist or counselor, whatever you want to call it, and I know that I'm broad strokes here, but what they will do is they will help accelerate that learning path, especially a coach or a mentor, and you'll be able to learn these lessons a lot faster because they will recognize them, because they've probably been there themselves. And so you may learn this lesson a year and a half from now, but by having a coach, by investing in yourself, by having some accountability inside that relationship, they can point those things out to you, and you may save yourself 18 months of heartache or pain or grief. And I think that's important. I think that's the biggest value I see in like getting a mentor or a coach is the acceleration of like, I see that. you're smart, right? You probably get there eventually, but they help you get there a little faster.
Yeah. And I would encourage you to do this, that list that you're making of everything you do, take that and give that to your coach.
Yeah.
And then also let them see your calendar and just say, hey, what do you think? Try not to get defensive, because they're going to be like, oh, you shouldn't do this. And your first inclination is to be like, well, I don't think I could pass that off to other people. Let them see that list. Let them see your calendar, and then truly trying to listen to what they say, because they will be able to view the situation from a bird's eye view or from an outside lens, and that's super important. The next point that we would make is plan your rest. Pastors, one of the 10 commandments is to practice the Sabbath. And if there's a 10 commandment that I think most pastors break, it's the Sabbath. They don't have a day of rest. You need to have that, or at least a period of rest, and you don't have that. You need to plan your rest every week. You need to block it off, and you need to say, okay, these are the only types of emergencies that will get me away from this. Somebody's deathly ill, etc. All other things will go through this individual or this person, and you need to be strict about that. So every week, plan your rest, plan your time with kids. And if somebody says, hey, I need some help, say, I'm sorry, my calendar's booked. Let's find something else. You've got to be able to do that. And sometimes it means saying no to good things, but you need to plan your rest. And then along those lines too, Justin, is prioritize spending time with your family. I was reading the new Eugene Peterson biography, Burning in My Bones, which if you haven't read it, every pastor needs to read that biography. Regardless of what you think about Eugene Peterson.
The Message.
Yeah, regardless of what you think about The Message, read that biography.
Yeah.
I mean, it is incredible. One of Eugene Peterson's biggest regrets is not spending enough time with his kids when they were younger. So you need to prioritize that, and you need to really prioritize that, because you're not going to get those years back.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I saw this morning, I think it said something to the effect of, like, it's hard to say no when there are no boundaries in your life. Something like that. And he was just talking about having boundaries, prioritizing time with your family. I want to say it's in the State of the Pastor from Barna. I'm pretty certain it's in there, and I don't remember the exact stat, so I'm not going to quote a stat, but I can tell you it was more than half. I do remember that. And the question was, like, to pastor spouses, and I think the question was something to the effect of, like, has ministry been detrimental or harmful to your family, or something to that effect? And it was more than half of pastor spouses said that ministry was like a threat almost to their family, and that made me so sad to see that, and I sort of grieve when I think about that. And as a pastor, you can prioritize your family, you can prioritize your schedule, you can create boundaries. Like, just because you're off and people call doesn't mean that you have to take the call, right, on your days off when you're with your kids or you're at a ball game with the fam, or t-ball practice, whatever the case may be. Make sure that you have those boundaries, and make sure that you hold fast to those, so that your family is not, like the State of the Pastor said, I'm pretty certain, harmed in this endeavor for sharing the gospel with the community. So I think that's important. And then the last thing on our list is really pastors. Pastors today, right? 100 years ago, it's like the pastor would get on the street corner and he'd preach, and like that's what he did, and he traveled and he preached. Now pastors are these mini CEOs or entrepreneurs that, like, you're just wearing so many hats in today's world and today's society, and you're responsible for so many things, and you're doing so many things. I think it's important, just like Wade had mentioned, writing out a list of things that you're currently doing, and should you be doing a lot of these things. It's okay. And it's fine. And in fact, we would encourage it, right, for you to use done-for-you resources of things that save you time. So, for instance, if you're in sermon prep and you're the one that's not only researching everything, finding good sermon illustrations, creating the PowerPoint, preaching, like those are many different hats, many different skill sets. Maybe take a few of those and leverage some done for you resources. There are many resources out there. We have Ministry Pass and Sermonary, of course, but there's many other good companies and good publishers that are doing good work to help and walk side by side with pastors and churches, and we believe in them as well. And so whatever resources that you use, it's okay. Use some done for you resources. We have illustrations. Bible, and that's we post a free sermon illustration every day. You can go there and you can search by keyword or topic. Ministry Passes illustrations. I know good sermon illustrations are really hard to find.
They are, and usually if you Google sermon illustrations, they'll take you to a site that was built in the 1990s.
I know,
and it'll be like a chicken soup for the soul type of illustration. It's just it's not easy, and so we try to bring you relevant illustrations that point back to the Bible, not just funny stories or things that will capture attention, but will capture attention and then help people to understand Scripture. I mean, that's really the point.
We also have announcement and event bundles. So, your church is going to need to promote things. Please don't, Pastor, don't be designing that stuff.
Yeah. Don't do it. You might be good at it.
Yeah, you might be good at it.
But you don't need to worry about it.
No.
It's your time is just more valuable than that.
And then, of course, with Ministry Pass, we don't give anyone sermons. So if you've come to our site before and you thought, I'm just downloading sermons, that's actually not what we do. We give you research materials. So we provide you some passages, some talking point ideas, some illustrations, a big idea of a series. So we provide you sort of this framework, this roadmap for you. You add your own voice to it. But we do give you the first 10, 15% of the content. And the rest is for you to develop through your own unique voice and perspective and community context, if you will. But that first 10 to 15% is important. I know a lot of guys, myself included, that wasted a lot of time trying to get going in that first, starting with the blank page, so to speak. And so it's okay. Leverage what we've done. I mean, we have a whole team that has been working for 7 years now on creating sermon series resources for churches and doing it in a way that you're still able to feel like I'm being faithful to the call. I'm being faithful to my own voice. I'm just having a little help. Just think of us as a team. You see all these big mega churches and these guys, that are super popular, and you think, man, they're such a great speaker. You've been to a pastor's conference and they come in and they're just so dynamic and amazing. You just need to know that those people have teams. They have people that research, and they have designers, and they have video editors. They have all those things. Ministry Pass, we sort of partner with you, and we serve as sort of part of your team in your endeavor to preach and present the message of Jesus. So it's okay. Whether you use Ministry Pass or not, we encourage you to use done for you resources that really help you be more efficient every single week.
Well, I'm not sure if this episode will change your life, but if you've learned something, make sure to tweet us your tips. What do you do for ministry life balance? What have you learned from us? What are your favorite points, things that you're going to apply? You can do that using the hashtag HelloChurchPod. Also, make sure to follow our new Hello Church Instagram. It's at HelloChurchPod. As always, if you're listening on YouTube, you can add a comment below. And here's what we want to answer. We want you to answer. What are your best tips for pastors on how to have a good ministry life balance? So what tip would you offer? Like I said, you can post using Hello Church Pod, the hashtag, or you can comment on YouTube. That's, I think, super important and helpful for other pastors who are reading through the comments. Yeah,
and then next episode, we're going to be talking about how to use a sermon calendar. What does that look like? We have several at Ministry Pass. You may want to create your own, which is fine. We're here to help you in that endeavor. Be more organized, get ahead, be more intentional about the content that you're preaching through in a given year or 2 years. And so I think you're going to really, really like next episode on Hello Church. My name is Justin Traps. It's an honor to be with you.
I'm Wade Bearden. We'll see you next time on Hello Church.